this story here in reference to Russell Brand and Tucker Carlson. So first of all, I think this was the first time I saw Tucker Carlson do an interview on independent media. So this was huge. As you can imagine, the Russell Brand interview went viral. He even acknowledged that on one of his videos that he did after that video, that interview really took off. Now, there are two parts of that interview that I want to focus on. One in particular is about Donald Trump, RFK Jr., where Tucker Carlson addresses that. And the other one is in reference to the media and, believe it or not, climate change. And I was surprised about his position on one of these, but I think you need to hear this discussion. So we're going to go ahead and start with the first topic here. It's a long interview, by the way, so we broke it down to two parts.
So, I suppose what we're asking there is that it seems that you said that Trump was no longer relevant in the political conversation. He was no longer the lightning rod. He was no longer the berserker of American politics. Loads of people on our platform absolutely love Donald Trump. They see him as the solution to America's problems. They see him as the great swamp drainer. It seems you have occupied varying positions on Trump at various times. Where are you on Donald Trump now? And particularly perhaps how that relates to the emergence of radical anti-establishment figures within the Democrat Party, notably RFK.
So how does he feel about Donald Trump now? And then he's going to talk about RFK.
Where am I on Trump now? Well, I love Trump. Personally, I mean, I made a huge mistake last November in getting involved in American politics, something I've never done before, and making calls, this guy's going to win. I think this is going to happen in this state. Meet your new governor, New York, stuff like that. And I was wrong on almost every call. I'm not a very astute political analyst. I'm not interested in politics. I never have been interested in politics. I'm interested in ideas. I'm interested in people.
So that part right there was kind of surprising when he said that he wasn't interested in politics. I was surprised by that because his show on Fox News mainly talked about politics a lot of the times, right? Now, granted, they don't always write their own script, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. You are part of a network, so they sometimes will tell you which topics you can discuss and which ones you cannot. But I was very surprised to hear that. I can only imagine what it must feel like if it were me. Imagine if I wasn't into politics and I was doing this show. I would show up every night, just be like, yeah, and today, so Biden's polling at 70%. I couldn't fake it, put it that way.
And so there's a primary going on in the United States between Trump and a bunch of other people, primarily Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, but others, Vivek Ramaswamy, for example. And I haven't said word one about it, don't plan to. I think looking back on this 10 years from now, assuming we're still around, I think we're going to see Trump's emergence as the most significant thing to happen in American politics in 100 years, because he reoriented the Republican Party against the wishes of Republican leaders. But when I think about Trump right now, so it's July of 2023, I'm struck by his foreign policy views. Trump is the only person with stature in the Republican Party, really, who's saying, wait a second, why are we supporting an endless war in Ukraine?
Is that true? So this is something to think about. Now, this is one of the things that Norm Finkelstein and I did agree with the fact that if Trump were still in office, if he did win in 2020, both of us did believe that we probably would not have the conflict that we have right now with Russia and Ukraine, simply mainly because of the fact that Trump did not start new wars. Now, he still, supported drone strikes and things like that. But that was one area where both of us did agree that we probably would not have this issue right now with Russia and Ukraine. But is it true? Is he currently right now the one that's a part of the Republican Party that's really pushing back against this? Because if you look at the other candidates, Ron DeSantis, the flip-flopper, we don't know where he really at. 1 minute he said he supported it, 1 minute he said he didn't support it. He all over the place. Nikki Haley is a warmonger. I can tell you from experience, she used to be my state governor when I lived in South Carolina. I know how she stands. Tim Scott, no backbone. Who's the other one? Vivek. Vivek, I think, is one. I'll have to see where he stands on this. But Trump has been more vocal about it. Now, there are some conservative politicians in Congress that have been, kind of vocal about this as well. But I mean, like, I will say there's a difference between just being against this war and being against all wars. Because for me, it's like I'm against all of them. I'm not trying to pick and choose here. I don't think we should have war at all. But I think that Tucker also has to realize that Trump is running for office. And right now, there is a sentiment amongst not just conservatives, but a lot of people in this country that are just tired of the wars. And so there is a base for that. So he is a candidate. So Tucker should, just keep that in his head, the fact that he is trying to win votes. So he knows how to speak to a room and he knows how to read the room. This is something where Biden does not do well. So he knows how to read the room. So he knows that there is a base for this. So that's something to think about as well.
And that, leaving aside whether Trump's going to get the nomination or get elected president or would be a good president, I can't even assess that. All I can say at this point is I'm so grateful that he has that position. He's right. And everyone in Washington's wrong. Everyone. And Trump is right on that question. And it's a big question. That war is reshaping the world. It's reshaping the economy of the world. It's reshaping populations. I was just in Romania last week, which is, of course, shares a border with Ukraine. The refugees in that region, the number of people killed in that war. Europe will never be the same because of this war. And
it's changing everything. And I just told you about the alliances right now. Like I told you about Turkey's trying to join the EU. Sweden wants to join NATO. Like it's a mess now, and it is changing things. And I wonder where we'll all be this time next year.
Really matters. And Trump alone among popular figures in both parties understands that, and I'm grateful for it. Whether he gets the nomination or gets elected, words really matter. Saying something true out loud matters. And he is saying true things about Ukraine, and God bless him. That's how I feel.
So Trump generated, I suppose, a new type of populism. He rebooted politics. He reordered the Republican Party. And but perhaps, is it fair to say that other than the significant fact that he was less militaristic significantly than other comparable presidents, at least recent presidents, I mean by that, do you think that he delivered in office? Why do you think he remains so fascinating? Do you think that the Americans, broadly speaking, that are attracted to Donald Trump are attracted by his foreign policy stance, or do you think that there's something else? And do you not think that RFK, who's, my understanding, he's been on the show a couple of times, he's now on Rumble, and I find him to be a very admirable man. He similarly is vehemently anti-war, anti this conflict, and seems to also have identified the unspoken intention to be the deracination and annihilation of Russia for globalist and economic reasons, rather than the rather naive assumption that it's in any way a humanitarian conflict.
I'm just going to sum that up because Russell's questions are really long. He's asking, does Tucker Carlson think that people like Trump because of his foreign policy, stance, or do you think it's a different reason, et cetera? And Tucker said, no, it's not, because I don't think it's because of that either. Because remember, we didn't have this war with Russia and Ukraine when Trump ran in 2016 or when he ran in 2020. So I don't necessarily think like that's the reason. I think the reason was that he knew he knows how to read a room. He knew how to speak to working class people in a way to let them know that they were forgotten, in a way that Hillary Clinton did not speak to that. So I think that's where a lot of like Trump's base came from, the people who felt like the workers, the people who felt like they were forgotten. Like, yes, are there some people who are Trump supporters that are racist? Yes, there are. But there are also people who support Joe Biden that are also racist too. They got that covert racism. It may not be overt, but they have the covert racism. So, regardless of how you look at it, I think the winning formula for a candidate on the national level these days is going to be, can you speak to the working class? And now that we do have this war with Russia and Ukraine, you're going to have to talk about that. And I think if you can explain to people why we need to call peace and we need to end this conflict, I think you're going to win over some people in that area this time around as well.
Democracy. That's my favorite. It's for democracy. Okay. Say the people who hate democracy. Well, I love Bobby Kennedy, and I've had him on my show many times. He announced for president on my show, which took a lot of stones on his part, given how despised I am by a lot of Democratic primary voters. I think he's a wonderful person. I'll say that. Just as a man, I admire him. He said the greatest thing any politician or any public figures ever said to me at dinner a couple of years ago. They've gone after his family. The pharma companies and their agents in the media have really gone after his family, his siblings. They convinced a bunch of his siblings to denounce his views. So painful. And I'm so close to my family, I can't even imagine that. And I said to him, what's that like? I thought I took a lot of shit. I can't even imagine what that would be like. If my brother denounced me, I'd probably shoot myself. I couldn't handle it.
Also, if it was Buck, he would be able to provide the weapon.
He would. Yeah. Well, yeah.
The family thing to me is just, I think RFK Jr. he's Kennedy. So he comes from one of those old school families where family is really, really important and it really does matter. But to me, it's like the family thing. Like I know so many people that are millennials like me that like a lot of people that I know just do not have that type of relationship with their families that like the Kennedys may have, for example. People are all over the place. Like some people live overseas, some people live here, that kind of thing. That's immediate family, but then also there's your extended family. And I don't think it's as uncommon today for millennials and Gen Z to not necessarily have that really tight relationship with like the extended family as it was for people like Tucker Carlson and maybe people like RFK Jr.
My brother's not going to denounce me. It's my best friend and wonderful man. But anyway, so I said to him, what's that like? And he said, and I'm quoting, I probably shouldn't be quoting a private conversation, but he said this to me. He said, I've got 7 children and they all love me. I don't care.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, you want to distill my values into a sentence? That's the sentence. So I really admire him. I don't agree with him on everything. I do agree with him, I'll just be honest, on most things, on the big things.
Yeah.
And so, no, I love what he's doing. I love his bravery, which is just remarkable. The amount that man has suffered for what he thinks is true, the amount of money he's lost, the friends he's lost. He's been ostracized in a way most people can't even understand.
But isn't that sad, though? Isn't that sad that RFK Jr. actually lost friends or relationships with family members because of what he believes about big pharma? Like, that's just very, to me, it's like, I've seen like families and friends forgive people for worse things. Desert Mantis says, if my family had money, I'd be closer to it. Way to keep it real, Desert Mantis.
Is he ticked off a drug company? Really? And he's persevered, and I really admire him.
If RFK and Trump have risen, as they plainly have, to capture the popular imagination, and yet both to a degree are stymied, shackled, or reluctantly tolerated by their party, what does that tell us about the shifting sands of American political life? I think the area where you and I most plainly and overtly align, perhaps other than the belief in God, I suppose, is our deep understanding that the military-industrial complex and big pharma are able to exert significant power over the Democratic Party, a democratic process that renders ordinary electoral politics basically meaningless.
Yes.
These two figures are like populist anti-establishment figures in a sense. What do you feel is the likelihood of either of them being able to pass through the internal mechanics of their parties, in the case of RFK, through the legal hurdles that are being placed in front of Trump at the moment? And what is the role of independent media, in particular, say, a figure like Elon Musk, who seems, at the moment at least, to have the power to fight on that terrain? I know there was a lot in that question, Tucker, but you've got...
Yeah, so this part was really pretty interesting to me because I honestly think he's talking about them fighting with the internal workings of their political parties. We already know the Democratic Party is going to try to cheat RFK Jr., right? But in reference to the Republican Party, in reference to the GOP, right now, Trump is in the lead, like way in the lead. DeSantis isn't even like it. I can't imagine any of those candidates like beating him for the Republican nomination. I don't see that possible or as happening. Also, the Republican Party doesn't have super delegates. Democratic Party does. And this is how they were able to do what they did to Bernie Sanders, actually.
I'd say a couple things. One, the United States has had precisely in 250 years almost one populist president. And that was Teddy Roosevelt, also the most popular president in American history, who was president from 1901. President was who he served as VP was shot to death until 1908. Most popular president the United States ever had, and he was a populist. The two biggest populist figures in the moment are Trump and Bobby Jr., and then we had a guy called Ross Perot run about 30 years ago who roughly had the same politics.
Ross Perot got like 18% of the vote as an independent, you guys. Can you believe that? You know, they had to change the rules after that. Ross Perot cost the election. They said Ross Perot cost the election for Bush Sr. They said he's the reason why Bush did not win re-election. You know, and after that, they were like, we got to change the rules for these independent and third-party candidates.
All four of those figures had one thing in common. They were all from the world they criticized. So you think of populist, you know, the English peasant revolt,
yes,
which is one of the most interesting things ever to happen, where they stormed the Tower of London and killed, I think they killed the Archbishop.
I'm from there. That died in Essex.
Yes.
Wat Tyler.
Yeah, Wat Tyler, exactly. We're not even sure if that was his real name. And
Wat Tyler.
And, but he was a legit peasant. Like, we don't even know when he was born. And that was not an effective rebellion. Of course, they did not free the serfs after that, as I recall. But the effective populists are the ones who critique from the inside and say, I grew up in this world. Teddy Roosevelt grew up rich, of course, in New York. Trump, Perot, Bobby Kennedy's family is one of the most famous families in the world in modern history. The Kennedys, and certainly the most famous family in Democratic politics. So these are people who know how the system works because they've benefited from the system. And so their critique is much more meaningful and much more effective, I would say, because they can bear witness to what they have seen.
Right. So these are the people that some people refer to as class traitors. Now, I don't think Trump was a class traitor, though. Trump still looked out for his rich buddies. Let's just be real. Like, it is what it is. He wasn't going to hurt himself there financially either. So those are those types of people that they would call like class traitors. And you got to be wary with them, especially if it's someone who's a billionaire, okay, or someone who's a million. Like, you got to be wary with some of them because, you know, some of them, they're all about like, yeah, I'm a class traitor until there's legislation passed that affects their financial interests. So you just got to just keep that in mind.
I don't think Trump has changed politics in Washington. I think the parties both have been very resistant to any kind of reform. And that's very foolish. That's a Ceausescu move. You see things changing around you and you can't metabolize it. You can't sort of change with the moment. And then you meet a bad end when you become that rigid. I think that Bobby Kennedy and Trump will both have a very tough time getting the nomination. I'm hoping that both of them will, of course, I guess. I'm hoping that their message will be heard. I don't know. I don't even know what I hope for in the process itself, but I want them to be heard. And they can now be heard because there are channels of information that people can tune into and listen. I mean, I would amend one thing you said when you said that, you know, these huge multinationals control our politics. Well, they also control our media.
Yeah.
They do. I mean, pharma, as you well know and often say on your show, is the biggest advertiser on American television. Probably true in the UK as well.
I still remember during the 2020 Democratic primary debates, there were actually commercials, pharma commercials against Medicare for all.
And so, you know, there's no incentive whatsoever to question their products. And now we have, because of the social media companies, Twitter and Rumble, and probably others, we have less filtered sources of information with fewer gatekeepers and a higher probability you'll hear something true. I think that.
But we're suppressed, Tucker. Who's going to tell Tucker how bad independent media is suppressed on YouTube? even a Rumble, if you're not on the homepage on Rumble, it's going to be hard for people to find you. But who's going to tell Tucker Carlson about the suppression of independent media channels on YouTube? We're heavily suppressed unless you're TYT, and well, they're not independent anymore, they corporate. But unless you're one of the channels that has a channel within YouTube, which means that you are actually a part of YouTube like TYT is, so they push you to the front of the algorithm with corporate news. Other than that, it is very hard to find independent media nowadays. I feel sorry for like anybody like starting a channel now. And I know it's been hard for me too, but I started 2 years ago. Anyone starting a channel now, if you don't have like somebody like that's huge, really helping you and propping you up or promoting you, good luck, buddy, because be patient, because the suppression is worse now than it was 2 years ago when I started.
That's a huge change. I mean, how can you, this is like samizdat. This is like, this is like information that the people in charge don't want you to see. And now you can see it. It really is the promise of the internet finally fulfilled. That's my hope anyway.
Okay, and we have to pause there because they get into a conversation that I can't discuss on YouTube. I know some of you were asking me, where is this? Yeah, so this is on Rumble because of some of the things that they talked about in this interview. They didn't put the entire interview on YouTube. There's only like small parts of it on YouTube. But yeah, if you want to see the full one, you have to watch this on Rumble. Now I want to get to the part where they go into more discussion in reference to independent media.
Well, I think my role is to tell the truth to the extent I can see it, to say what I think is true, always with the knowledge that we see everything, through a glass darkly. We don't see things clearly. We don't have perspective on ourselves, the world around us. We get a lot wrong. I've gotten a lot wrong, that's for sure. But you do your best. And you cannot allow people to force you to lie, period. So that's how I see my role.
It's interesting because I wish I could play it, but I can't. But there's a part of this interview in reference to forcing people to lie where he talks about what really happened, what really went down at Fox. And I can't play it because it's about January, what happened that January. And even when they get to that part, they say we're moving off of YouTube now and we're moving just to Rumble and locals. So you won't even see that conversation. You won't see it on like I said, most of the interview is not on YouTube for a reason. But it's unfortunate I can't play that for you. But the reason why I'm telling you this is because one of the things that he mentioned in reference to Fox wanting him gone had to do with him trying to correct lies about that particular month. So use your imagination, and you can watch the full interview after this if you want.
I think you're asking the right question. And I asked the same thing about the climate movement. I mean, I'm bewildered by it. Apart from my own family, there's nothing more important to me than nature. I think I spend an above average time in nature amount of time. I mean, I've organized my whole life to be in nature. So I really, really care about it. And I'm very upset about the many ways in which it's despoiled, at least in my country. I mean, nature's not doing well. The environmental movement is gone where I live.
This is the part that was very surprising to me. I did not think that Tucker Carlson was concerned about nature or the environment or like he goes on to say more, but I was really surprised to hear that because you would assume based on the conversations that he had on his show on Fox News that he didn't really believe in issues in reference to climate change or the environment or anything like that. But again, this goes to show you the difference between when you're working for someone, a mainstream media network, and then when you're not, and you can talk more freely and tell people how you really feel. I also didn't know, he also mentions this in this interview, that apparently he lives in Western Maine. So this is all like kind of new to me. And I mean, I go to Maine every summer, but this is kind of new to me because now this makes more sense because I'm like, if you live in Maine, like, yeah, there's New England in general. People here really do take like the environment seriously, more seriously than any state I've lived in. Whether it's the recycling, whether it's the composting. Like, they take it more seriously anywhere else that I've lived. And people that live in Maine really do care about the state. And they also care about keeping things local and organic. And, you know, there's a element of California, I think, that has that as well. But that is one big difference I can say about Maine. Massachusetts doesn't have a lot of chains either. But when I go to Maine, it's a whole different thing. Like, most things are local, or it's from the farm, like that kind of stuff, right? So I was shocked to hear this. I didn't know any of this, but I was surprised to hear that he actually does care about the environment. And listen to what else he's going to go on to say about profit.
And we pollute, we put up chain stores and strip malls and pave things we should not pave. We are very tough on nature in the United States. And the environmental movement does nothing to stop that. And so my question for the climate people, and I have no doubt the climate is changing. It's always changed. I live in a place that was completely sculpted by the glaciers, which only melted 10,000 years ago. There were people living where I live in northwestern Maine when the glaciers receded 10,000, the Native Americans 10,000 years ago. So, like, this is a feature of life on Earth. And so I have no doubt it's changing again. And I would be completely open to the possibility that people's behavior is accelerating that change or driving it to some extent. It doesn't sound crazy to me. I don't think it's proven, but I'm open to it. Of course I am. My question is really simple. Which of your solutions to climate change disempower you? So when you act, you're a father, on behalf of your children, you are doing things because you love them. They're not necessarily in your interest. Like, you'd rather go take a sauna or do some yoga or hop on your wife. But no, you have a child with needs, so you love that child, so you do something for that child. That's what it looks like to serve and love someone, is to do something you don't want to do, doesn't help you in any way, but at least potentially helps that other person. I see the climate movement not doing one thing that doesn't enrich or empower the climate movement and its corporate sponsors. Not one. So
this part right here, I got to call out a couple of groups. Sunrise Movement. We've talked about this before on RBN, where some of these environmental groups or organizations, it's like they made a lot of money, but we don't really see them doing anything. Sunrise Movement has gotten donations from people like George Soros. I mean, I'm talking a lot of money. Okay. There's all these different environmental organizations, like we're the climate this, and we're the environment this. And they get all this money. Like, they have a lot of donors, rich people who donate to these organizations, but I don't see them producing anything. So I have to ask, like, where does the money go? And then if you look at an organization like Sunrise Movement, they're always out there like endorsing like progressive candidates to run through the Democratic Party. But then those candidates that win, that get in, they don't really push for these issues either the way that they're supposed to. So it's just, what happens to all the money? And I've been wondering this for a while. Okay. I mean, I think it's great to have organizations. I think it's great to have people that care about these issues. But there's two different things here. There's caring, and along with that, educating. But then there's also action. And when it comes to the action part, I don't see anything happening. I don't see any types of solutions, you know? So where does all that money go? Like, I couldn't believe he said this. Like, when he said this, I was like, well, I'll be damned. Think about it.
For example, not to be boorish here in lecture, but I'll stop with this. Like, if I understand, the ecology correctly, trees are like helpful if you're worried about rising CO2, correct? Because they consume it and then emit what? Oxygen. So if you're really worried about climate change caused by carbon dioxide, you'd probably be planting a lot of trees. I don't see a ton of, and I would be very for that as someone who truly loves trees and spends a lot of time thinking about trees. And
you guys hearing this?
I have a lot of trees and maintain a lot of trees. I love trees almost more than anything. So, like, where's the nationwide effort to reforest the United States?
We got to pause here for just a second as well. That's another thing. Instead of growing more trees, people are cutting them down. Companies are cutting trees down so that they can build strip malls. Do you need another strip mall? They're cutting them down so that they can build, oh, let's build some more housing. You have housing. If you reduce the price so that people can afford it, that would help with the homelessness crisis that we have in this country. They kill me when they say, we don't have enough housing. We do. You gave it to BlackRock. You let BlackRock buy it. And they made it unaffordable for the average working class American. That's what happened to the housing. I can't buy, like right now, if I were to try to buy today, there's no way I could do it now. No way. If it wasn't for like those interest rates dropping during the pandemic, buddy, no, there's no way. And I'm looking at houses online because I still get those update emails. Forgot to hit unsubscribe. I'm looking at houses online that have like 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. These houses 2-3 years ago in certain areas in the States would have gone for like maybe 500,000. That still is fucking expensive, but I live in Massachusetts and gotten used to it. These houses that are not even renovated, got carpet falling apart. They're selling these houses for like $650,000 today. So it's just, I'm here to tell you, people aren't trying to organize to plant trees because companies like BlackRock and some of these mayors that are in bed with these investors, these real estate investors, they're all working to cut the trees down to build more housing for rich people, not for you. Let's wrap this up here.
Don't see it. Instead, I see a lot of solar panels from China that don't work, that actually wreck the environment, industrial wind farms that wreck where I live. Like, I live near them. I know what they do. They kill all these birds of prey. It's like, they're destroying the environment, but they're becoming richer. So on January 6th, tell me one solution that doesn't make you more powerful.
Yeah.
And then I have to pause there because they get into the, they get into that other part of the conversation. But I think, guys, if you do have time and you get a minute, go over to Rumble, Russell Brand. It's called Live, Tucker Carlson, world first interview since leaving Fox. And you can watch the full interview there. Okay. Because like I said, some things I just can't, I can't show on here. I'm sorry. But I think you need to see that, guys. I really do. I think you might be surprised by some of the things that you hear. Now, I still disagree with Tucker Carlson on many things, many things. But the climate issue there to me was pretty interesting. So if you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and hit that like button, guys. That helps me out with the algo. Thank you very much. I'm going to hit up these comments here. And then I have a shout out I want to do. Thank you for the super chat, Mr. Missing. We got to save the democracy, black man. Maybe we can address your plight next time. White liberal. There you go. That's well said. Robert says, I think this war will be U.S. biggest foreign policy blunder. I can see it heading in that direction. Deneen says, I'm suspicious that they would allow a real dissenting voice to have 6 million subscribers. He also has 33 tattooed on his arm, as in 33rd degree Mason. It's probably because, he is a celebrity. So maybe that's why they let Russell Brand kind of get away with some of those things. Like I said, he has received red flag on, I know one of his videos got a red flag one time, and that was when he said he was going to be going live on Rumble. So they've hit him too. But yeah, I think it's because he's a celebrity. That could be part of it, but he does good work. She's Black said, I'm sorry, but it's hard for me to feel sorry for a wealthy political family member. I hear you, She's Black. Thank you, Quintessential. KB and Kyle's second wedding idea, let Cornell officiate, LOL. You guys got jokes tonight. Brian said that Bush sabotaged Ross Perot, threatened to release dirt on his daughter. Okay, I didn't know about that. I'm going to look that up, Brian. And thank you for the super chat, Roger. Theo didn't get elected 4 times like his cousin Tucker. That's a good point. Yeah. I don't know if I would say that the Theo was the most popular one. I don't know how to say that. I thought FDR was the most popular one. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric, and then we'll get to the shout out. Yeah. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. I hit a YouTube milestone allowing me to super chat for free, but for some reason, StreamYard doesn't record it. But it was a part one that did not show up to me talking about the 22nd term limit. What I said was, you mentioned congressional term limits. When they drafted the 22nd Amendment term limiting the president, exempting Congress and SCOTUS, the state should have rejected it until Congress included themselves. Ooh, interesting. They also believe in keeping things white by keeping it cold. You know, Black folks don't like the cold, Sabby. Dwayne is the only brother up there. Stay warm and keep safe, Dwayne. Blink twice if you need us to come in there and rescue you. Oh, no. Jokes. You know, I got them. I love Mainers. Remember, they just put on the ballot this November public power. We just passed New York state law allowing for the New York Power Authority, created by Governor FDR's largest public power authority in the country, to completely take over the providing of power throughout the state with an aim to cut fossil fuels out the mix by 70% by 2040. This would be outlawing private power in New York State. That's huge, while giving municipalities the choice to municipalize their own power, like we're doing with Long Island Power Authority. That's huge. Well said, Roger.